Welcome. My name is Lars Tieskehøy. Welcome to this webinar for the Unscrambler X version 10.4. I'm the product manager of Camo Software, and I will hold this introduction to the new features of the Unscrambler. Just to see that everybody can, or verify that everybody can hear me, there is a, in this GoToMeeting application, there should be a possibility to raise your hands if you go to the Attendees tab. So just to verify that you can hear me, can you please click that raise your hands button? I see that some people are, a lot of people are raising their hands. That's good. I'll just give you a few more moments to see if everybody can raise their hands, because that means that everybody can hear me. And it also means that you know how to get our attention if you need it during the webinar. So just look for the hand symbol next to your name. Okay, I think that's almost everybody. I'm gonna lower your hands now. But if you have any questions during the webinar, just please ask them. There's a possibility to raise your hand, as you know, and also there's a question tab in this application. So if you have any questions, please just use those functionalities to ask the questions, and my colleague Maria Patterson will manage the questions as we go. And we will try to set aside perhaps 5 minutes at the end of this talk for answering some questions. We might not be able to answer all because there are many attendees, and I hope you have many questions. But in any case, we will look at all questions that you ask and we'll reply to them after the webinar if there is no time to answer them during the webinar. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask questions. So the reason you are all here is because we released Unscrambler X version 10.4 this week. We are very happy to announce that because it has been a long time since last release, not least. And we are very eager to, we have been very eager to get this out to show you the new functionalities in Unscrambler X. This is only a 1 hour webinar, so it won't be possible for me to go through everything that is new, but I will focus on some of the new methods, the main features, and also demonstrate a little bit of the new workflow, the modified dialogues and stuff that you probably are used to working with in the past. There is probably a mixed audience when I think about it among you. Some of you might have used earlier versions of Unscrambler before. Some of you might be completely new to Unscrambler. I will try or during this webinar, I will try to focus on the new features mainly. So it will be assumed that some of the previous functionality, previously known functionality of Unscrambler is known to the audience. If, of course, if this is if you would also be interested in getting a full webinar, a full introduction to Unscrambler as a first-time user, there will be opportunities to that later in later webinars as well, or you can follow our courses. So with that, I think I will start. So the highlights of this talk will be the main sections that you see in this slide, and of course perhaps the most dramatic change, if I might call it that, since 10.3 is that we have replaced the entire design of experience module with a new software, basically. And that is Design Expert from Statis, which is a world-leading and very much used design of experiments software in the industry. I will talk a little bit more about that. In the general changes, as I mentioned, I won't have time to go through everything, but these are the main topics that I will go through. And after this, I will show also a demo. Some new transformations we have included is sample alignment and piecewise direct standardization. And also there are two new methods for control charting in 10.4, which is SPC and moving blocks. Just very short about the Design Expert integration. As I said, we have included as part of the software, or as integrated in the software, we've included Design Expert software version 10. This Design Expert version 10 is just out. It was just released. So even if some of you are used to using Design Expert from the past, this will also could be a new version for you as well, because I haven't gone out widely with it yet. But those that download and install the Unscrambler will also get access to Design Expert version 10. This software is very comprehensive when it comes to design of experiments, and there was no reason for us to keep the old DOE functionality. So if you have old designs or designs that have been created in 10.3 or earlier versions, they can still be loaded into Unscrambler, but there won't be any support for analyzing them. So if you want to analyze them, you should create them from scratch in the Design Expert. But of course, you can still use your old results. So the simple, this integration, it's a first step integration, I can say that. We are very happy with the collaboration with Statis as a company, and in the future we will also plan to integrate tighter. And also we think there will be a lot of benefits from both companies, so we can draw on each other's talents in different areas. So, but in this first version, it will only be affected. It will appear as two completely different programs. They are installed separately, but every time you click one of these design-related functions in the Unscrambler, Design Expert will open. So perhaps I can just show you quickly what it looks like. So this is the new version of Unscrambler. So if I go to Insert, Create Design, Design Expert will open like this. A new feature in Design Expert version 10 compared to version 9 is that there is a design wizard. I won't go into details, but this means that if you're an inexperienced or a non-statistician, this will guide you through a series of steps to arrive at the best design. Just to be quick here, because I won't go into details too much, if I create a new design, this is immediately you see immediately all the different design options that you have for mixture, combined, factorial, and response surface. So it's a big selection here. And if I, for instance, select a regular tool level design, all the different designs are listed in this table. So based on the number of variables that you need to use and the number of runs you can afford, you can select a suitable design. And you can select and the resolution is given as well. So a resolution 4 design, for instance, is often a good idea to use. And this will take you through the different steps. You can add the factor names here, if this is temperature with units degrees Celsius, and different values here. You can fill it in like this. You can fill in the different responses, add different responses. So this is yield with units percentage. You can estimate the power and everything. When you click finish, this is the design table that you get. And just for the purpose of this demo, I just fill with random. So this means that I have actually spent a few days in the lab and measured these variables. And Design Expert is not only about creating designs, it's also about analyzing them. So there are various options here for selecting effects, either graphically or numerically. So if I just select all the two-factor interactions and create a design, you will get an ANOVA table for this. And obviously, because I inserted random data, the design will not be significant. And then there are different options for optimization. It's a very flexible software. What I will show now is how to use this if you want to use it further on in the Unscrambler. For instance, if you want to create any multivariate models based on the design data. So what we do now, it's very simple. Just click Save. We save the model like this. Once you're back in Unscrambler, go to File, Import Data. Design Expert. And yeah, I can't remember exactly where I put it, but I don't think it's exactly this one, but it's similar anyway. So this is how you open it. I know you have imported it into Unscrambler, and you can do the other analysis. If the regular ANOVA is not sufficient, you can go to import the data into Unscrambler like this and do regular multivariate analysis. If you want to make changes and add response variables, if you want to make modifications and then continue working in Design Expert, that's also possible through this Modify Extend Design, in which case it's opened back in Design Expert. So that was just a very brief introduction. If you want to learn more about design of experiments, please look out for webinars where we'll go into detail of this. And there will also be courses held by KMO and Statis as a cooperation. One function which is missing since 10.3 is analyze design, because that was just replicate functionality of whatever is in Design Expert. So with that, I want to continue with the other functionality in 10.4. One thing that, especially for those of you who are used to working in Unscrambler 10.3 and earlier models, or even 9.8 and earlier, there have never been any requirements in Unscrambler for unique headers or even existing headers. So this is a new feature in 10.4 that we require that all row and column headers are existing and unique. That is the main headers, like you see here. So in 10.3 it would be possible to have, for instance, in this example, have all the 9 first samples called corn, the next called olive, and so on. That would not be possible in 10.4. So if you load a previous project with non-unique headers, these will be automatically updated the way you see here. And this is important for us because it allows very much better quality control when we map between different tables, and also if we want to apply these models in online applications. So some of you might be concerned what will happen if you want to how do I maintain my old sample names if they are modified? So there is a function which is quite simple to use, which was introduced in Service Pack 2014 for 10.3. So some of you might be familiar with it already. If you right-click on the column header, split text variable, you will get this dialog here, and you can split by separator and define a custom separator, which is a hashtag. And because the unique header, the replicated headers will be appended with hashtag and replicate number. So when you split like this, you will be able to add two new columns. One is the original sample name, and the second one is the replicate number. And this is I should perhaps mention that some of this functionality should be familiar to some of you already, because all the functionality that was included in Service Pack 2014, which was released last year, is also taken forward to 10.4, and this is one example. So one of the changes that you will notice immediately is that the PCA, PCR, and PLSR tabs or dialogues have changed. We have introduced, rather than these older tabs that we used before, which we got some feedback that they were quite not a little bit cumbersome or tedious to have a good overview, because you have to walk through all these tabs. Then we wanted to introduce a navigator like this, and also add back, next, and finish buttons. So if you don't want to go through all different panes, you can always directly go to any pane that you want to modify and then click finish. We have modified some of the panes as well. One example here is the X weights pane, where we have replaced the radio buttons and apply button with buttons for each of these different weighing options. And this practically means that you need 2 mouse clicks instead of 3. There's also an algorithm in changes in the algorithm tab, and notably there are 3 panes that have been removed, which is warning limits, set alarms, and auto pretreatments. They are no longer there in 10.4, but instead we have the new outlier limits pane, which I will show you as well. So these screenshots that you see now are example from partially squares, PLS, but there will be similar changes for PCR and PCA as well. You see the max iterations, and which is associated with algorithm changes that were introduced in Service Pack 2014 originally. You have an option to calculate exact Q residual limits and allow missing values in prediction. Allow missing values in prediction is new in 10.4, meaning it was not included in Service Pack. And the way it works by default in 10.3 in earlier versions is that if you have input variables for prediction that have missing values, then these will be filled in automatically or estimated during the prediction stage. So the predicted value will still be there. We got a lot of feedback that this was a bit dangerous, because there could be real outliers or poor measurements that went undetected. So we introduced this as an option to allow missing values in prediction or not. So by default in 10.4, the allow missing values in prediction will not be checked. That means that if you have missing values in the prediction input data, then the output will be missing as well. If you have checked it, on the other hand, then it will be if you have checked it, then it will always be estimated. There's one exception to the first thing I said. If you don't allow missing values in prediction, it might still give a valid output, and it will give a valid output if the variable in question has absolutely no influence on the model. That means if the loading weights or the regression coefficient for that variable is 0, then we don't care if the input variable is missing because it doesn't influence the model and we produce the output anyway. This model warnings here is familiar from the warning limits tab in the previous version. This is an image of the new outlier limits pane, and this is available only if the identify outliers is checked. If I go back a few slides in the model inputs pane, you can see there is an identify outliers checkbox here. By default, it's unchecked. So by default, the model won't generate any model or any sample or variable outlier warnings. But if you check it, then this tab pane here is added to the model, and this is a merging of the functionality in the previous outlier warning limits tab, which had the purpose of producing a warning if some of the samples in the calibration or some of the variables in the calibration model were potential outliers. So you could mark outliers automatically and so on, and you can remove them and recalculate. Then we had the set alarms that had a different purpose because the intention of that was mainly to apply it online in online predictions. So you could have warning limits and alarm limits that were raised if some new samples during a process were getting out of control. So we found that these two functionalities were somewhat overlapping. So we wanted to introduce them into one dialog. And you can notice here that all tests are optional as well. So you don't have to define any of them. Perhaps I should explain. No, I can do it when I do the demo. The model structure is similar but slightly different. There is a new, if you expand the raw data node of a model, you will see that there is a category variables data table there, which is added if there are any category variables present in the original input data table. So you don't have to select it as an input to the model, but if it's present in the same data table that the model is based on, then it will be added here. And that has some advantages when it comes to sample grouping and recalculate options. That's why we wanted to maintain these category variables as part of the model structure. You see also an example here where you have sample outliers and variable outliers because those tests were checked in the outliers pane. And these replace the old outlier warnings and outlier list nodes that were part of 10.3 and earlier. There's one thing I can mention which is relevant for those of you that integrate the prediction engine or similar in your own software, instrument software for instance, which is that column headers for entire pre-processing range is included as part of the model. This means that you can actually, in your own software, you can actually list and map instrument output with model input. So it's an added quality control. But for the desktop user of Unscrambler, it's not. You don't have to worry about it. It's hidden anyway. And also just a tip that, of course, these outliers that are listed here, they will be marked if you, in a scores or loading plot, click the Mark Outliers button. It will only list those that are marked for are listed for the set number of components, which is the number of components that the model that Unscrambler automatically suggests, unless you change it. Regarding compatibility, if you open an old model in 10.4 for the first time, you will get this warning here. It's not anything dramatic. It's just a notification that this model structure has changed, and the outlier limits options have changed as well. And if you want the full 10.4, if you want the model is completely usable in 10.4, but if you want new outlier limits, etc., and make certain that all the functionality is included, it's often a good idea to recalculate it and save it in 10.4. So once you save the model in 10.4, this model will no longer be given. One feature that also was a very important user feedback the last years was actually the sample grouping dialog, because it was a bit cumbersome to use and easy to make mistakes. So we wanted to make it easier to use, more flexible and more robust against misuse or misunderstandings as well. So this is how it looks like. If you select this, you have this different option. You can cross-validate sample group by cross-validation segments by a single click, by row sets, by value of variables. If you select value of variables, it will select among the data in the raw data folder of the model. If this is a scores plot, for instance. If it's a raw data plot, then you can select any variable in that same matrix and perform the sample grouping. If you use external variable, then it will apply the unique headers, and you can select any table or matrix or model output result to do the sample grouping based on. And also the last thing I want to mention, which is a general change, is the also previously, those of you that have used Unscrambler before have noticed that in the bottom of the window there is a tab for each analysis node or each editor node or each plot. So every time you make a new analysis or make a new plot or something, you will get a new tab like this. And if you navigate between these tabs, navigate between the different models by clicking on the tabs, then all previous plot settings would be remembered and will still be remembered. However, if you, in 10.3, if you clicked on the model node itself, all the plot settings would be reset to default, which was a big annoyance for many users, because if you compared different models, then you had to reset the sample grouping and the labels and everything every time. So now if you click on the PLS model or the model node directly, it will remember the previous settings. So that's something you can have in mind. It will not remember the previous settings after you save and reopen the model. Okay? So that was a quick sort of run through of this functionality. So I spent some time on those slides, but I still want to just show you what it looks like. And I'll try to go through it quite rapidly with a simple example here. So this is an Octane data, some Octane data. We are using it in different courses and perhaps a help material as well, so some of you might have seen it before. So it looks like this. I can plot it, select the spectra sample-wise. And also one thing that you can see here is that this was also part of service spec. If there are category variables present in the raw input data, they will be automatically sample grouped, right? And in this case, there were two different sample groups, and I can change between them. And yes, and the sample grouping, you can switch the sample grouping on and off, and there are different options here that you can look into You can choose to plot only some of them, all of them, and different options here. I can't go through, I don't have time to go through it all, but there's room to play around here. So if I go to partially squares regression, you see that the new dialog will open. I can select NIR spectra, training, Octane as a response, and I can click the Identify Outliers button. And you see that the outliers limits pane here is added. So I can move around here now. I can click directly which pane I want to go to. So if I want to weigh these variables by standard deviation, I just click the button like this. So it's a bit simpler than previously. I don't want to do that now. I go directly to the validation tab. These are the familiar options. The algorithm, kernel PLS, is selected by default based on the size of the input data. I think if it's less than, if the smallest input data dimension is less than 100, then the kernel or SVD option will be selected as default, but you can still change it, of course. And if you come to the algorithm tab and notice that the kernel options or SVD options are disabled, that's probably because there is missing values in the input data. So if you have missing values among these data, then only NeatBelts will be allowed. And the outlier limits are given here. So by default, F residuals and Hotellings T2 are selected, but you can change the F residuals to sample residuals, which was part of 10.3 and 9.8, or Q residuals. All these options here are scaled versions of one another. So there's no option to, it's not useful to test all. That's why you remove the others if you select one. Similar with the Hotellings and leverage, you can select either one of them. This option here, warning or alarm, is just to select which one of these warning limits or alarm limits you should use to mark outliers in the model. So only one will be utilized. It's only when you save the model and use it in online applications that both these might be usable. If you just use Unscrambler 10.4 for regular desktop use, you can just keep the warning as an outlier detection limit and modify these as you wish. Okay, I'm going to click Finish. It's calculated here like this. I can go to sample grouping. I can select category variables and additivated. That means that there is something added to these samples which are not part of all samples. So if I sample group by this, you will see that that's the reason for some outliers. You can see that these are single, simple click operations like this. Okay, and once again I can click, I can just select this. And recalculate without marked as usual. So with that, I think I will talk a little bit about the sample alignment, which also is a very much requested feature that we are glad to be able to introduce. So a little bit of background here. If you do statistical analysis, usually you have to align the data such that, so if you have data from different sources, you have to align them such that, for instance, predictor and regression variables will be sorted one for one. So the first sample, the first row refers to the first sample, both in the X and Y table, for instance. If you have that's a simple example, but if you have collected data from multiple instruments, of course, there is often a wish to analyze those together, and previously there wasn't a good way to merge these in Unscrambler. And it's time-consuming and prone to error if you're doing it manually. And also, there is no option to do it automatically. Previously, there was no option to do it automatically during prediction of, for instance. With this sample alignment, we included it as a transform, and we support auto pretreatment as well, meaning that when you do a prediction, you can actually select individual variables, and the alignment will be performed automatically when you perform the prediction. So the dialog looks like this, and it's found under transforms. There are different options, as which we call sample ID, event polling, and something called sample ID with additional timestamp. I will show you those just after this. Only numeric data can be aligned, so you should have that in mind. And there are multiple options for how to align these data as well. If you take the simple example, this is the simplest possible example. You have some sensory measurements, and you have some laboratory instruments. Laboratory measurements from laboratory instruments. Then in this example, the instrumental data are given sorted as there is one sample or measurement per sample, and they are labeled A to L. In the second sensory data here, you see that the same samples are present, but they are ordered differently. So with this sample alignment, it's very easy to just say that the instrumental data takes preference. We align the sensory data such that they're aligned with the instrumental data. So the order of data here is the same as the order of data here. And that's completely up to the user how to organize the samples. This is a slightly more complicated case where you have multiple sensory assessments. So each assessor, 1, 2, and 3, tastes or assesses all the different respiratory jams. And that means that and we want to align those with the instrumental data, of course. And we can do that in two ways. Either we can replicate the instrumental data such that they are given for each of the replicates here, or we can take the mean or median or something across different assessors. And that's what we've done here. So the aligned data table in this case, you see it has the same dimension as the instrumental data and the same order, but the juiciness, for instance, for sample A is actually the mean of sample A for replicate A, B for replicate 1, 2, and 3. And there is an option to this is how you specify which data table to take preference, to put it that way. So there's an option called basis for samples in the output matrix, and if you click that for the instrumental data, then the column dimension and the row dimension and order will be the same in the aligned data table as the output. If, for instance, in this case, sample A, B, and C are not found in the additional data table, then those will be missing in the output table, which makes sense. It's also possible to align by timestamps. The event option will still use the basis as samples for the output matrix. So if you select temperature as a basis, that means that the row headers here and dimension will be the same as the row header in the output matrix. And then you select for the alternative matrix, you decide how to how to align the data. And the way you do that is that you specify an alignment window. You can, for instance, say that when the first sample comes, which is at 2 o'clock at this date, then you can go to the other table and see if there is a sample or a set of samples at the same time and within the interval specified by the alignment window. So if you say minus 10 minutes plus 10 minutes, it will look for samples or pressure samples in the interval between the time 13:15 and 14:10. Right? So in this case, it wouldn't find anything and it would be missing. Right? And then it does the same for the same. And this also means that you can have delayed. If you're on a conveyor belt, for instance, you can specify that the measurements from instrument B are delayed a specified time interval compared to the first one. And so that means that you can align them based on the sample rather than the absolute time. Polling is similar to event, except that you poll every set interval, for instance, 5 minutes. And then there's a combination of sample ID and time. And this basically means that you do the event. You do the event as usual, but only within the specified groups, which is specified by the primary matching column here. And I think I'll just jump directly to the next version, the next transform, which is piecewise direct standardization. And this is a method for calibration transfer. So a typical example is that you have one instrument in the lab, which is referred to as a master instrument, and then you have multiple instruments out in the field, but that are similar but not identical, of course. And that means that if you calibrate, there is often a wish in such scenarios that you, rather than calibrating models for each individual instrument, you want to do the calibration based on the master instrument only, and then apply the same model to all field instruments or slaves. So, but because those instruments are not identical, there is a need to make the data measured on the slave instruments to look as if they were created based on the master instrument. And that's what you do with the piecewise direct standardization. It's not suited for auto pretreatment because you will need a separate calibration transfer model for each slave instrument. But so that would be created for each instrument. But during, if you want to apply this in online applications, then our prediction engines and online applications will handle it separately. The workflow in Unscrambler is that this is just artificial data that I created, by the way. These are, you can recognize these plots from the Octane data that I just showed you. So it's not, those that paid attention will remember that this is actually additivated data and this is non-additivated. So I included this only for proof of concept to see that what the method actually does. So what I imagine now is that, or what I tell the software is that these blue spectra are the same spectra, are the same samples as the red ones, but they have been collected on a different instrument. So when I use that as input to the method and specify the slave data and the master data. Excuse me. And of course, remember that these are artificial data. If this was a real example, it's important that each spectrum was collected based on the exact same physical sample on the two instruments. So you have a physical sample, you measure the spectra on the master instrument, you take the same physical sample and measure the data on the slave instrument. And that is a requirement for this method. There are some options on how well to fit the slave data to the master data. The simplest option is just to use subtract mean only. And that's perhaps something that we would recommend to start with if you will try this method. And then you can fit any number of components to make the fit better. But remember that there is a high risk of overfitting if you fit too many components. You see, in this case, I've fitted a lot. So the slave and master data look almost identical. If you then create a model based on the master data, you will notice that there is no auto pretreatment here. And this is because you have to calibrate. Depending on the slave input data, you have to sort of use a calibration transfer method which is specific to that slave instrument. So in Unscrambler, what you do is that you select a PLS model, which is based on the master instrument. You input the slave data, which has already been transformed in the previous step, in step 1. And that means that even though it's slave data, it has been transformed to look as if it was collected on the master instrument, and you can apply the model, and the prediction will be good. So we have a few more minutes to talk about the process control charting, which is something that hasn't been a big part of Unscrambler in the past. We have sort of historically been very good at analyzing spectral data, and not we haven't been as big into the process data. So this is starting to change now. So that we want to be able to use Unscrambler and the associated online monitoring tools, process pools, to be able also to monitor process data. So the background is that we want to monitor and control process parameters at a specific level and be notified when the process reaches a steady state. We have included 2 new methods for this: statistical process control, SPC, and moving block methods, MBM. First, if I can mention statistical process control, and this is I call it univariate monitoring of steady state process parameters. By that I mean univariate, everybody understand. We look at one variable, process variable at a time. Steady state, I'm not sure if it's the correct wording, but what I mean is that they are supposed to be controlled at a specific level in the process. So there would be purely random fluctuations over the course of the period when you monitor the process. The charts included are individual moving range, and average standard deviation. And then we get basic statistics, test for normality, and capability analysis as output. These methods are found under the Tasks Analyze menu. And SPC is a univariate method. What you get is some plots that show the what data look like, and you can toggle between different variables and decide whether to use look at the individual data points or some summary charts like mean versus range, like that. And there's, if you look at the means, mean range or mean standard deviation, you also select the subgroup size that you take the mean across. So that means that if you have these are time series data, so if you specify a subgroup size of 5, you will take the mean of 5 consecutive samples that you monitor and trend. And in these plots, you will automatically see the center line and the upper and lower control limits. So if the process deviates outside of this, that's an indication that things are getting out of control. If you change the subgroup size, you can click the calculate button to save the subgroup size with the model. And then there's a capability analysis as a next step in SPC. And here you specify upper and lower specification limits to assess the capability of the process. How capable is the process? How many defects can be expected what is the percentage of defects that is allowed in the process? So this is what is used in Six Sigma, for instance. If you have a capability, process capability of 2.0, that means the same as I think it's 3.4 defects among 1,000,000 observations. Right, so those are very strict limits, and you can, if that's not what you are interested in, you can use Four Sigma, which is 1.33, and then you can set the limits in the Unscrambler, and these will be colored accordingly. Just very quickly in the end, the alternative process monitoring method that we have included is moving blocks. And this is either you can monitor individual variables or you can monitor scores, which is output from a PCA or PLS model, or PCR. And it shows, you define windows. If these are spectra, for instance, you can define windows of a certain number of spectra. You can take the mean and standard deviation, and then you move to next steps. You get a new block, and then you take the mean and standard deviation. And these means and standard deviations are trended or plotted in a trend chart. And then you can see when these reaches a steady state, which is shown in this slide. So the input, the limits to the moving blocks is in this version. In this first version, it's we just specify them manually. So in the moving block mean, which is shown in the upper plot here, you see that this could be the humidity or something, which is steadily increasing, and then it reaches a plateau at the end. So when it comes to this plateau, when it comes within these upper and lower limits, then the process is completed or has reached the steady state. So if this is a blending process, for instance, then the blending can be assumed to be complete. And similarly, you trend at the same time. You trend the standard deviation, which is given in the lower plot, and you specify a similar limit for the standard deviation. And then you can apply this moving block model on new data afterwards. And the same limits will be applied. That was actually all I had for this webinar. I hope it wasn't too quick at the end. I wanted to spend some more time at the main analysis, which is PCA and stuff, because I think that's what most of our users use. And I had planned to show you a little bit, demonstrate a little bit more of sample alignment and process monitoring, but I think we can leave that for the next webinar, which we will schedule. So I don't know if we have time for some questions, Maria. Okay. I think if you have questions, first of all, I can mention that I didn't say it in the beginning, but there are two handouts that most of you probably have seen already that you can download. It's the 10.4 brochure, and also it's a PDF of these slides that I've been through. So you can download those. And there is a little bit more details perhaps on the slides and what I've been through, so you can read through it. Please send me an email if you have any questions. The email address is given here, lg@kmo.com, and I will look into those questions and reply to them. And also, if you want more information, please follow. We will also advertise new courses and webinars on our website. So please check in on us from time to time if you're interested in more. For instance, there will be a upcoming webinar. Date is not set yet, which is instead of what's new in Unscrambler, it's what's in Unscrambler. So where our chief scientific officer will go through Unscrambler for those of you who might not be familiar with the older versions. You can also, if you haven't done it already, you can do the upgrade for 10.4, or you can download 10.4 on the support portal. And of course, if you are new to Unscrambler, you can download a free trial as well. So I think with that, please make a note of my email address and send me any questions if you have. And thank you all for joining.